All right, so it is story time. To all of the people who are now following me and Lewis, or let's just say Lewis and I, on our journey to conceiving, I just wanted to give a little bit of backstory. I know I've been posting a lot and sharing about things that are going on currently or within the IVF, but let's go back to the beginning. So, number one, Lewis and I met in 2005 through his god sister, one of my best friends. Shout out to Quia. We went and saw him at his job. He used to work at Chick-fil-A, or he managed Chick-fil-A, I should say. And for some reason, I was being super spicy that day, and I was like, "Oh, he's cute," and I told him he's gonna be my baby daddy. So fast forward a couple of months, he started giving me a call. At that time, I lived in Atlanta, and he was in Huntsville, Alabama. And, you know, we started talking on the phone. Then he asked me to be his girlfriend in 2006. Yeah, 2006. And 2007, I was still lost in what to do with my life. I had already graduated with a bachelor's, and I wasn't really finding what I wanted to do. It was actually nursing. It's actually Lewis who suggested nursing. And I was like, you know, it is one, I'm a nice person. Everybody says I'm very sweet and kind. I'm pretty smart, I think. And, you know, one, it's a job or a career choice, I should say, that you can depend on. And there's room for growth. Like, you don't always have to be at the bedside, but that's for another video. So actually I went to nursing school at Southern University, A&M in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Shout out to Susan. And Lewis went to Southern Law School. Guys, he broke up with me within 2 weeks of moving to Baton Rouge. Talked about, you know, law school is so intense, yada, yada, yada. He didn't get rid of me though. We stayed together. But yeah, so he actually graduated number one in his class. He was actually editor-in-chief of the Law Review. I graduated number two in my class. And yeah, so, you know, we moved to Houston. He had several opportunities to go different places, but we settled on Houston. And we got married in 2012, and it was great. We purchased our first home, and we were like, yes, let's do life together. Let's travel. Let's do all that kind of stuff. But unfortunately, his mother started to report some symptoms of pain in her leg. I told her to go to the urgent care because we had just flown, so I wanted to make sure it wasn't a blood clot or something. They ruled that out, but further testing showed that she actually had leukemia. Lewis flew to Huntsville. He stayed there for about a month. They got her stable. We moved her back here to Houston, and it was such a blessing because Lewis and I, we purchased a home, and it was a good size, and it was actually very conducive to having her here because we stay upstairs, but downstairs there's a guest room right next to the bathroom, kitchen, all that stuff. She doesn't have to climb the stairs. So she came to Houston to do treatment. She did several rounds of chemo, kept coming back, and eventually my husband matched for a bone marrow transplant, and that's what put her in remission. And that was the first maybe 3 or 4 years of our marriage. And we were only married, like, you know, going into the first year of our marriage when she unfortunately became ill, and we had to move her here and become her caretakers. So, you know, when you have a loved one that is ill, I always tell my patients, you know, chronic conditions or really severe acute conditions is not just the person going through it, it's their support system going through it with them. So it was pretty intense those couple of years where, you know, we were really trying to see if she was going to make it. And thank God, you know, the bone marrow transplant worked. She is cancer free. And then we noticed, though, you know, chemotherapy is pretty intense, and she handled it like a G. She was still driving and taking herself to the store and doing all that kind of stuff. But we noticed that she was more and more forgetful. And at first we kind of chalked it up to chemo brain, because that's a real thing, you know, just the fog of forgetfulness when you're going through chemo or after chemo. But, you know, the more and more the memory issue progressed, we were like, let's get it checked out. And now she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So that meant that, you know, she was going to be with us permanently, and she still is with us today. And that was almost 10 years ago. So I give that backstory to give a little bit of history, because, you know, young people, I was 28, 29 when we got married. And, you know, you think for the first couple of years, you're going to travel, you're young, you're professional, you're making money finally, you're not college students and broke anymore. And, you know, that was our plan. But, you know, again, it was a blessing that we were here, because she was able to come to MD Anderson, one of the best cancer centers in the world. People from all over the world come to Houston for treatment. And we were in a position to do it. Also, I'm a new nurse, so at that time, I'm able to, you know, care for her, because at one point she had a PEG tube and just all of this stuff that we had to help her through. So I believe it was 2014. Lewis was like, let's pull the goalie. And when he said pull the goalie, that meant birth control. And since my cycle, when I think I was 12 when it came on, it was horrendous. Every single month, my grandfather had to pick me up from school. I would miss several days of school because I was in such bad pain. And, you know, I just thought that was a norm for me. Especially because, you know, you have family members who, oh, my sister had the same type of pain. And we kind of normalize pain with the female menstruation, which is not correct. Again, a whole nother video. But yeah, I would have horrible cycles in college. I would go to the ER because of my pain. I would be told I had dysmenorrhea. At no point did someone say, hey, you should go get that checked out. And of course, in the ER, they're all about, you know, patching you up and sending you on your way, which is fine. But it still was such a big part of my life where I could barely walk. I remember when I was in nursing school, I was in class. I had to walk out of class, and some of my friends followed me out, and I was on the floor. They had to call 911, and I'm being wheeled out of the school on a stretcher. And, you know, people whispering, talking, oh, is she pregnant? Is she having miscarriages? Yada, yada, yada. But no, it was literally just my cycle. And I thought that that was how it was supposed to be. So fast forward when Lewis is saying, all right, I think it's time. We're ready. We're in a good place. Yeah, we started trying for real, you know, because we had never used protection. And so there was never a oops, there was never a my cycle. She was on time all the time. She was knocking on the door like, girl, you ain't pregnant, who you fooling? Like, I didn't even have like pregnancy tests on standby because my period was irregular. So after 6 months, I went to my gynecologist and I was like, hey, we're trying to get pregnant. There's no oops, there's no lateness, there's no nothing. And he was the first person to inquire about my cycle. And I told him the horrendous pain I was in and how it impacted my life. You know, I would miss work or miss school. And literally when my cycle comes, my world shuts down. I'm just in bed or limping or whatever the case may be. So he told me that he thought I may have had endometriosis. And that was the first time I ever heard of it, even though I was a nurse for several years at that time. You know, I hadn't paid attention to it, maybe in, you know, women's health or whatever, but it didn't click for me. So when he said that, he's like, you know, the only way to find out is to actually do surgery and go in and see. And sure enough, we scheduled surgery, and he found some chocolate cysts, which are endometriomas. Basically, when you bleed, they have these capsules, and the old blood kind of gets trapped in there, and they are like cysts, and they have to get removed. My anatomy, my pelvic anatomy was shifted, and I had adhesions and all of this stuff from the endometriosis. And he did the surgery. I came out fine. Everything was nice and put back into place after he finished. I was in my last year of my master's program. So 2015, actually 2016, we had the surgery. And I was going into my last year, I should say, because I graduated in 2017. So we were like, let's just let my body heal. He wanted me on Lupron, or the depot shot for, how long was on it? For 6 months at least, to kind of calm things down. And then after that, we were like, okay, well, you know what? I'm almost finished with school. Let's just get that out of the way, and then we can, get back at it and try to, get pregnant. Thinking that would be very helpful. And yeah, so we did that, and I graduated. I started working right away. And again, we're trying, and nothing. So we decided to visit the fertility clinic. The first place that we went to, I wasn't crazy about it. And we did an IUI there. And that was my only experience with them. I just didn't feel a connection. And that's really big for me. When I have a provider, I want to feel heard. I want to feel seen. And I don't want to be just another chart on your desk. So we talked to some friends who had, gone through IVF, and they suggested the current place that I'm at now, Center of Reproductive Medicine, but I think they just were purchased by Shady Grove Fertility. So yeah, we went through that process of, transferring over, getting a new doctor, starting over with baseline labs and all that kind of stuff. And that was 2018. Yeah, so I think 2018, we did our first round of IVF and getting all of the eggs. And I think I had at least 2 surgeries that year, because I had more cysts, I had polyps. So yeah, I've lost count. I think I've had like 5 or 6 surgeries related to my pelvic region. So we get the eggs, we get the embryos. It's 2018, 2019. Louis, sidebar, he used to do MMA fighting for fun or just for exercise. And one day he was training with a guy who was professional, and he was actually training for a fight, and he got hit in the head, got punched in the face, and it should have knocked him on his butt, but it didn't. And he was like, yeah, just, very excited that he was able to take a punch from a professional fighter. Little did we know, a couple of weeks later, and I didn't know about the punch until later, but he started complaining of headaches and just not feeling good. And I was checking his blood pressure, it was fine. I was checking his blood sugar, it was fine. And the headache would come and go. So, and he doesn't really get headaches for real. So we're like, okay, of course go get it checked out. I'm fine. Go get it checked out. I'm fine. It wasn't until we were supposed to fly to his god sister's graduation, where his little niece was going to be there. He didn't want to get her sick if he, had something, because he also felt like he had a cold or something going on. So he went to go get it checked out, and he told her about the punch. And thank God he did, because she was like, well, you got hit in the head. That's head trauma. Let's go just get a CT. So I went with him to the CT, and I'm sitting in the little waiting room, and he's in there. And I hear him say, can you please tell my wife she is a nurse? And I was like, oh, shoot, what's going on? And so they immediately walked us over to the ER. And of course, they told me that he had a brain bleed. And it was a significant one, to the point where he should not have been neurologically functioning. So we go over to the ER. It's literally, like I said, they walked us over, and the nurse practitioner comes in and she's looking at him like, why are you sitting here talking to me? Basically, like, you should not be able to communicate because of the size of the brain bleed. And so that totally freaked me out. And I called his other god sister, who is a surgeon. I knew that I could count on her because she is just gonna, tell me, this is what I need you to ask, da 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 da. And so she, helped me through that process. And they said that they needed to, they told us our options or whatever. So they said they wanted to transfer us to another hospital who had the capability of taking care of him. And I was like, yep, we're going down to the med center. So we get in the ambulance and we go down to the med center. And again, everyone is looking at him like, why are you talking? Why are you up? And mind you, this guy has flown to several work trips. He has partied, or, he's just been living his life with these headaches. So, so we get there, and basically they say, because he is so stable, because he, they do those neuro checks every 2 hours. At one point he was just reciting them because he was just so annoyed how they would come in and talk to him. So yeah, we get down to the med center. We get an amazing neurologist on his team. And so their thought process was, because again, he's so functional, that maybe the brain bleed will be absorbed and, we won't have any issue. So they kept him for 24 hours and they did serial CTs and they didn't see much change. So he was discharged home, of course, with instructions to return to the ER for any changes. So I had to go back to work. And so I go back to work, but I had a friend come over and watch him, and, just to make sure he was okay. And when I called, or when I got home that night, he was like, oh, so yeah, he threw up. And I was like, oops, we're going back to the hospital. We don't do projectile vomiting with the head trauma. So we went back to the ER, and it had gotten bigger, three midline shift. I can never remember the measurement, but his brain is shifted over, and it was more severe at this point. So they were like, we have several options. We can do a craniotomy and, pull that stuff on out. Or they can do a burr hole, which is less invasive. It sounds like they burr a hole into the skull, and they're able to drain the blood out that way. And thank God that they were able to do the less invasive one, because when you are on the neuro floor and you see people with their skulls gone because they've been, they've had to take it out, and they have the helmets on, and just the recovery process, it is so much. So this is him in the hospital. And I think that was a 3-week ordeal from the time that he was diagnosed to the time where he had, was it a 3-week? I should say a 3-week ordeal from the time it was processed to the time after we had surgery, recovery, and all that kind of stuff. And then, we're home. I said, let's go for a walk because I want him to stay active. And he's also having trouble sleeping at this time. So I'm thinking keeping him active will help him sleep a little bit at night. So we go out, and he's like, yeah, I can't see out of my left eye. And I was like, what do you mean you can't see out of your left eye? He was like, it's just really blurry. So in my mind, again, he just had a neurological event. So I called his doctor, and it was amazing. Like, when I say the best neurologist ever, Dr. Kitagawa, that was his name, the best. So he was like, yeah, bring him back on, because again, he had just had the surgery. So we wanted to make sure that there was nothing going on there. They did the scan. He was fine. But he had fluid buildup behind his eye. He had pseudotumor cerebri. And he had an episode of this when we first got to Houston. He had a minor eye surgery. They drained it or whatever. Well, it came back with a vengeance. And we had another amazing specialist, an eye specialist. and he was scheduled for surgery again. Usually for this type of procedure, the doctor said that they use, some kind of Q-tip to soak up the fluid from behind the eye. And in this case, he had to suction it. He had to suction. It was that much fluid behind the eye that, yeah, Lewis does everything big. And it was great after that. His vision is still a little off, but he can see. And y'all, God is amazing. You can't tell me nothing, because first of all, he had a traumatic brain injury with no neurological deficits. Second of all, he had 2 neurological things unrelated within the span of a week after surgery. And his vision is perfect. He is practicing. And when I say practicing, he is working or practicing law. He is doing his really first love of building cars. He is a real estate agent. He is the best husband, the best son. Like, he is it, okay? So we thank God for that. And I tell that story because that was 2019. So 2019, after that, we are green lighted once he's good and I'm good to restart the process and get a transfer going. And this is later on in the year. I think, the timing just kind of is all jumbled in there. But let's fast forward to the place where we were supposed to do our transfer. We're supposed to do our transfer, and COVID hit 2020. And I actually had the first patient of COVID that I had. That's when, we hadn't declared a pandemic yet. We didn't, it was just still so much we didn't know. We still don't know a whole lot. But, we had a waiting room full of people, and one of my patients came in, and she was a really healthy young lady. She had just gotten married. The week of her wedding, I had to treat her for strep throat. She got over that. She got married. She went out with people who were out of town. And of course, at this time, nobody was wearing masks. Like, we didn't know anything. And, she came back in the clinic and she looked sick. She was breathing fast, tachycardic. Her heart rate was racing. She was talking in spurts, and so she was having conversational dyspnea. And when I listened to her lungs, they sounded like trash. So I was like, I think you have COVID. I need you to go to the hospital right now. And I wanted to send her via ambulance, but she declined. But her husband was there, and so he took her straight there. And anybody that I send to the hospital, I follow up with them later that day to call and make sure, one, that they went, and check in, see how everything went. And so I did follow up, and the husband told me that she was still in the ER, and they hadn't admitted her yet, but she had x-rays and had double pneumonia in both lungs. And guys, that was the first contact I had, and I was supposed to do my transfer later that week. So of course I had to let them know that I was exposed to COVID. And y'all remember at the beginning when we were like, COVID tests were taking weeks to come back. Y'all remember that? Weeks to come back. And so, at that point, I suspected she had COVID. Oh, that's what it was. They didn't test her. Her husband said that they didn't test her until later. And I don't know what that was about. But anyway, we didn't get the results for at least 2 weeks. And all of us had to be tested, of course. And again, that's when everything was taking forever to come in. So needless to say, I had to cancel my transfer. And then it was declared a pandemic on my birthday, March 13th. And that's when the world, shut down. And of course, they weren't doing transfers anyway. And I felt so bad for the women who were already in process. I mean, I can't imagine anybody who had to have their cycles canceled, their transfer cycles canceled. I was just praying for them. But yeah, so we got through COVID, and well, I shouldn't say got through COVID. We're still getting through COVID. But once they opened back up, 2020, we got through 2020. I'm trying to see. We did a transfer 2021, I believe. And we got pregnant. And it was very rare. They said, it's not always the first transfer that people get pregnant. And we did. When I tell you I peed on every stick I could just to show that I had a positive pregnancy test, because I had so many negative ones, I was just beyond myself. And we were all excited. And then unfortunately, we miscarried at 6 weeks. And that was intense. And I knew I was pregnant because 1, I was just more exhausted than normal, and 2, I was craving ice cream. Like, I ate ice cream for a week straight, and I don't like ice cream like that. I love cake, I like pie, cupcakes are my jam, but yeah, me and ice cream. But I was like, oh, I need ice cream. And y'all, when I say ice cream, I was like eating like a big thing by myself, like not sharing or anything. So unfortunately, we had that miscarriage. And so I take that back. That was 2020, the end of 2020 that we did that. Because 2021, Thanksgiving 2021 was the anniversary, because we had our DNC after Thanksgiving. So it was 2020 that we got pregnant. 2021 was the 1-year anniversary. So after our miscarriage, we did another transfer in April of 2021, and that did not take, unfortunately. Since then, I think I've had 2 surgeries to remove polyps. My last one was a couple of months ago. And in all of this, with my last transfer, the second one, my doctor relocated out of the state. So come in Dr. Bruno Gaston, who is amazing. Love her to pieces. And that brings us up to speed. So right now we are, that doesn't bring us up to speed. So once we had the transfer that didn't take, and I transitioned over to Dr. Bruno Gaston, we were talking about, because I'm getting older at this point, getting as many eggs as possible, because Lewis and I, want at least 2 kids. I still want 3, but at least 2 children. And to have that, the statistics or how many embryos you should have to get that number, she wanted me to have at least 4 to 6. So we did 2 IVF rounds and got 0 genetically normal embryos. And so after we got 0 embryos from 2 rounds, she suggested that we meet with the geneticist and kind of look back at embryos that we had still in storage that may be viable. And the ones in particular, she's speaking about mosaic embryos, because those embryos, some of them have gone on to have become healthy babies. And I'll do another video on exactly what mosaics, are, because that's another video. I say that a lot. So we have 1 genetically normal embryo. Her embryo name is Elsa. And then we have 2 mosaics. We call them the mosaic twins. They are not twins, but it's just because there are 2 of them. So we have a total of 3 embryos. Right now, I am in the process. If you see my patches, my estrogen patches, and I don't like these circle ones because they don't sit well on my skin. Oh shit, that's not good. I am on my estrogen and my aspirin, and I'm going to do that for 2 weeks. I go back, not this Monday, but next week, Tuesday, I go back, the 3rd, to see where I am. No, it is Monday. And once they are where my labs are, where they want me to be, then we'll add the progesterone and oil. And of course, I'll take you guys along with me on that journey. But yeah, that's kind of where we are. It's so funny, you know, I used to want 6 kids until I actually met a couple with 6 kids and saying, okay, no, that's when I knocked it down to 3. But you know what? It's amazing. This is the club that nobody wants to be in. It's something that you just don't expect. Like, I didn't even contemplate or calculate infertility in my life, right? I've heard about it. I'm a nurse, so you know, you hear about it, but I didn't think that would be our reality. I fell into that trap of, I did everything right, you know, I got my degree, I got married, you know, we were doing what we were supposed to do. Why can't I get pregnant? But now, knowing with my diagnosis of endometriosis and how it impacts my ability to get pregnant, I kind of scream or try to scream things from the rooftops, especially with my patients, you know, if they're young or even if they're, you know, in their 30s and 40s or whatever the case may be, and they are single or they're married and they're just not ready for kids, or my single friends, it's like, you know, make sure you take your fertility into account. It's not given. It is a gift. Life from God is a gift. And, you know, we have things in life that we'll experience that will make that harder. So if you are, you know, over the age of 36, or if you are in your early 30s or 20s and you're like, look, kids may not be for me right now, but I definitely want them, or you just want the option, you know, talk to your gynecologist, talk to a fertility specialist. I hate how with family planning, you have to be trying for a year if you're under 35 before they say something is wrong with you. Because, you know, and I think that's for, you know, just people who are normal cycles and whatnot, but there's so many people who have regular cycles and they're told to try for a year, but they have unexplained infertility. All your labs and your hormones and your lining is normal. Your fallopian tubes are open. So I'll get off my soapbox. Just talk to somebody if you want to have babies and you're not ready. Know what your options are. You can always, you know, collect some eggs, because if I had known about endometriosis to the extent that I do now, and if I'd known how it's going to impact my fertility, I'm guaranteed I would have collected those 20-year-old eggs or those early 30-year-old eggs, because the older we get, the less eggs we have and the quality of eggs go down. So this is where we are. It's hard as hell, because when I go to the store, it's hard to see pregnant people or see little kids. I made eye contact with this cutest little girl the other day, and you just yearn for something that is seemingly so easy for other people, and for you, it's hard. And it's hard as a couple, you know, financially, emotionally, spiritually, like all the leaves of your life are impacted by infertility. So that's where we are, but we definitely have hope. Lewis is a rock star. He keeps me grounded and level. I have an amazing group of friends and people that I'm meeting through sharing, you know, on social media and stuff. So that's kind of where we are. I absolutely am learning patience and my strength and deepening my relationship with God and my husband, and knowing that I am going to be a mom. It it's not going to be the conventional way, but I'm going to be a mom, and y'all better get ready, because I'm going to be the most over-the-top ridiculous mom. But yeah, thanks for asking and thanks for listening.